Hi there, namaste from India. So in this video I'm going to talk about the biggest spiritual misunderstanding on earth. And it's a pretty big one. But before I get to that specifically, then there are a couple of things that I need to mention first here. One is that some of the concepts that I will be mentioning in this video come from my understandings of the Right Use of Will series of books by Cianda Rohan. So I will put a link down below the video here to Cianda Rohan's website if you happen to be curious to check out some more of her teachings. Now, the other thing that I want to mention first here is the subject of guilt, and this will relate a little bit later in the video here. So there are sort of two different conceptions of what guilt is. There's guilty versus innocent. But what I want to talk about here is the feeling of guilt, which is that, in fact, guilt is not a feeling. Guilt is suppression of feeling. And it is something that is very prevalent throughout human society. And guilt is what keeps us from vibrating our being spontaneously, of just being in a state of completely free expression of ourselves. Guilt is that which holds us back in our expression. So just a quick little example, pretty much everyone has experienced this at some point in their life, is think of one of those times in which you something struck you especially funny, and you found yourself in a laughing attack situation in which you just couldn't hardly control yourself from laughing really hard. But chances are you were probably in the company of other people who you didn't want to seem too completely ridiculous to. And so you sort of stuffed that down and held that back to a certain extent and eventually managed to regain some composure. So guilt basically is that act of repressing our completely spontaneous expression, whatever it might be, whatever emotion or feeling it might be. So just to give a basic understanding of the concept of guilt and how it rules our lives to a great extent and keeps us from coming to our full potential. So, the biggest spiritual misunderstanding on earth. The biggest spiritual misunderstanding on earth, as I see it, is that humans have, to a great extent, confused Lucifer with God. So there is a worthy debate around the concept of whether or not there is actually a Lucifer or a devil. There are those who are totally fixated on the devil and always talking about who and what the devil is and how he's manipulating Earth and how to avoid falling into the traps of doing the devil's work and all this kind of stuff. And then there are those who say that this is a universe of oneness, that there is no evil force, there's no devil that is opposed to God, that we all come from the same source of consciousness, and it's all God. And it is not a dualistic universe of an evil force that comes from this direction and the loving force of God that comes from this direction, and they're fighting each other out, that isn't how it is. And my understanding is actually that these are both correct. And so I will do my best to explain this in telling the story of Lucifer. And so this comes directly from the Right Use of Will books. So how the story goes is that at one time everything was united as one. There was just one pulsing, vibrating consciousness of being. And then this unified singular consciousness decided to have an experience of separation and split him/herself. And this split, in particular the split between masculine and feminine, God and goddess, sent God flying off in all different directions. And I've talked about this in a few other videos. The concept of imagine a beautiful vase, and this is the oneness that I'm talking about, of all consciousness being together. And then imagine taking a baseball bat and hitting it through this vase as hard as you can, sending this vase scattering off in many different pieces. And that which we now call God is a especially large piece of this vase that was left intact, while we are a tiny little dust particle scattered off in some random direction. And so this piece of this original vase that is especially large and magnificent looking compared to us is that which we call God, and that part of this original consciousness is seeking for this vase to come back together, back into its original state of oneness. So God is a piece of this this original vase, which we are also a piece of. We are all part of this original unified oneness. So Lucifer then is also a piece of this vase, this original consciousness that was oneness, and also a especially large piece of this vase, not quite as large as God. But the difference is that Lucifer does not have the desire for everything to come back together into oneness. Lucifer wants to keep things separated, and Lucifer wants everyone to go back to sleep, basically. God is like trying to wake people up from the trauma of this experience of the oneness being shattered, and everyone, as a result of this shattering of the oneness, having completely different experiences, flying off in different directions and having different impressions of what happened, and coming to their own conclusions and having their own desires and motivations of whether or not these individual spirits, us, want to come back into the state of oneness or continue flying off in separation. And so God is trying to wake people up, basically, and say we need to come back, we need to get unified again, and come back to our original state of being this pulsing, vibrating being of love and light. And Lucifer is opposed to that intention of God, trying to come back awake and alive. And so there is, in fact, as I understand it, a force in the universe that is opposed to God, which is actually part of God, part of this original oneness, as we all are, but there are different experiences and intentions and motivations across the whole spectrum of these different spirits that resulted from this original separation. And so Lucifer is doing everything that he can to manipulate and distract people from this mission of God, to try to wake people up and bring people back to a place of being in love, of vibrating love and light, and of coming back into oneness within themselves as a part of the process of coming back into oneness with God. And what complicates matters here is the fact that Lucifer is a part of God. Lucifer is the light of God that is disconnected from feeling, because love is not a thought, love is a feeling. And you can't be loving without being connected with feeling or emotion, the feminine essence. And so Lucifer is completely cut off from his feminine side, you could say, from any kind of feeling, whereas God is seeking to reunite with the feminine. And so Lucifer has the light of God, and so can easily confuse people into thinking that he is God, because he is a part of God, but just with different intentions and without the feeling of love and without the intentions of being loved. So I have a list here that I wrote down of two different gods, some different qualities of two very different gods. So the first is God A. And here's what God A would say, or espouse as being important, or godly, spiritual, religious. and on a path of goodness. Follow the rules. Don't think for yourself. The authority knows better than you. If you're bad, you will go to hell. You were born a sinner. Your religion is the only true religion. Your body is not of God. Your base feelings and desires are wrong. Practice self-denial. Emotions should be suppressed. Spiritual leaders must be celibate. Sex is not of God. Women should not be spiritual leaders. Self-knowledge obtained through such tools as yoga, meditation, psychedelic drugs, sexuality, dance, music, and other means of awakening inner energies is forbidden fruit and the work of the devil. So those are just a few different tenets, you could say, of God A. Now here's God B. Follow your heart. Think for yourself. Your truth is valid. Hell is simply your own separation from God. You were born a being of love. God cares of what is in your heart, not which religion you belong to. Your body is part of God. Your base feelings and desires are to be honored, embraced, and balanced within you. Practice self-love and acceptance. Emotions are an integral part of being and of God. Spiritual leaders can decide for themselves in regards to their own sex life. Sex is a spiritual act of love and creation. Women should be spiritual leaders just as much as men. Self-knowledge is the purpose of life. So God A and God B, which one of those sounds more like the God that rules over Earth's religions? I would say it's God A. Women shouldn't be spiritual leaders. Original sin, you were born a sinner and you have to spend the rest of your life trying to make up for that. So that which is worshipped as God on earth, to a great extent, is actually this force which is Lucifer, and which is seeking to dissuade people from coming to true self-knowledge, true inner discovery, to genuinely waking up spiritually, and is opposed to the intentions and desires of a loving God to bring things back together in oneness and to empower people to be in their truth, be in their power, and to have true self-knowledge. I wanted to add a little bit of humor to this and read something that's been going around Facebook. You might have seen this. This is something that was written on one of the signboards in front of a church that normally has words of wisdom, or else the times of the church services. So these are the words of wisdom according to the Orange Church of God, and I can only assume this is serious, but maybe it's a joke. I'm not sure, but I think it's for real. Orange Church of God, it says, and it's a photograph of that signboard. Surfers, skateboarders, musicians, artists, vegetarians, occupiers, activists, addicts, and fornicators are all going to hell. Repent now. So this is actually the way that some religious people think, which is that basically anyone with any character is opposed to God and is going to hell. And I think that sort of captures to some extent this view of many within religion, that following God means basically being like a foot soldier and just following orders, doing what you're told, and not thinking for yourself too much, and following the rules, and hoping that then you will ultimately end up in heaven. So getting back to my original thing at the beginning of this video of talking about guilt, then basically this evil, if you want to call it that, Luciferic force uses guilt to control people and to distract people from bringing forth their honest self, from exploring themselves fully, and to keep them on a path of subservience and submissiveness that keeps people from coming into their true potential and power. So the ultimate expression of this perspective of guilt, this belief, is that of original sin, that you're born bad, basically, and you have to spend the rest of your life trying to hopefully make up for that somehow, and eventually make it into God's graces. And this doesn't sound like a loving God to me. He sounds like a real jerk, and someone who is very constrictive and judgmental and not very open-hearted or open-minded. This view that you have to just follow the rules, do what you're told, and if you're lucky, you might get into heaven that way. Whereas what I would say is that a genuinely loving God wants us to bring forth our full potential as human beings, as spiritual beings, to explore ourselves, to discover our inner truth, to go inward as deeply as possible and truly discover what is there, and come to terms with it and balance with it, and honor all aspects of ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and come into a place of true self-knowledge and inner realization. And I think that's what the Adam and Eve story is about. Is the apple represents true self-knowledge, and that the story is telling you, don't go there, don't eat that fruit, you can't handle it. Perhaps even this represents Kundalini energy, which Christians are always posting comments below my videos about Kundalini, talking about how Kundalini is the devil and is a demon spirit and all this stuff, when in my view it is exactly the opposite. It is the divine life force of God and our true power and potential. And so what it comes down to is you just have to decide for yourself what makes sense to you, what sounds like a more loving force, a more supportive and open-hearted force in the world, one that is telling you to just follow the rules and do what you're told, and don't rock the boat, and don't discover too much about yourself, or one that is saying, be yourself, live life to the fullest, live with a passion, and be open to learning in the process about the world and about yourself and about spiritual reality and what's really going on in the universe. So I would say come from a open mind, that there is a force that is within this universe that is genuinely seeking for us to come into our true power and to come into our own unique perspective, not simply following the rules of this is the way it is and that's just reality, and deal with it, and don't question the authorities who state who you should be. Find out who you are for yourself and honor that, and that is the path to coming back into a place of balance and alignment and peace within and oneness with all that is. So thanks a lot for watching. Kind of packed a lot into this one, but I hope that sort of crystallizes some things in terms of the spiritual path and what is the true path of power and of love and what is not. All right, take care.